There's a common practice here in Ghana amongst the students who have been through the senior high system and the tertiary system. It is called the chew and pour syndrome. For most of these people, they have to pour out exactly what the lecturers have taught them before they can pass the exams. But what other factors account for this, and how is the chew and pour system affecting us as a country, especially as regards our developmental agenda? Let's get onto the campus and talk to the students and ask them, why would you chew and pour to pass an exams? What's your name?
My name is Perry.
Perry
Akofol.
Akofol, and you're a student of Accra Polytechnic.
Yeah.
And what's your level?
200.
Level 200.
Yeah.
Well, it means that you've written some exams before. I'm looking at the chew and pour system. You know what it is?
Definitely.
What is it about?
It's basically a situation where a student doesn't study and it gets to exam time and he has to probably get everything at once and just pour it out like that on the paper during exam.
Is it the situation when you only don't get to study and so you pour it out during exams?
Definitely.
Because I know that there are some lecturers who produce handouts and they would want you to produce exactly what they give you in the notes.
Yes, some of them do that. And yeah, some of them do that. Some of the lecturers, they do that.
Do you think it's the best way to go?
I don't think so, because in the long run, it tends to harm the students. I have experienced that before. As students, we do that, and you realize that if you chew and pour, it happens that you pour out what you have chewed, and nothing affects your life. You don't stand to study from the things that you have chewed, because all you need to do is get the thing into your head and pour it out. So in the end, it doesn't help the students.
Do you think it's the reason why we have a lot more people who are theorists, but they can't really be realists as in practicalizing what they have learned?
Definitely. I think that is a factor. I think that is a reason also. And even as a nation, it is not contributing to the nation's growth, because if someone would have to go through an entire 4 years, waste all that in school, and would have to be doing this chew and pour thing, and in the end he comes out with no knowledge of what he went to school to do, you know, it affects the country's growth.
And how do we remedy the situation?
I think students would have to sit down and study actually. Imagine if you are given 30 balls of kenke to eat a day. It is so impossible, you know, but if you are given it one at a time or one a day to eat it, it is very possible. So students would have to sit themselves down and study on a daily basis, because if you are taught on a daily basis and you study on a daily basis, it goes a long run to help you grow in knowledge.
You'd want them to be educated rather than become literate?
Definitely.
What's your name?
Nana Bediako.
Nana Bediako. And you're
Yes.
a student of Accra Polytechnic?
Yes.
And what's your level?
Level 300.
Level 300. You've been through the school for some time now. I'm sure
Yes.
you've written a couple of exams.
Yeah.
So how do you learn for your exams?
Well, I just I learn using past questions.
And you know what they call chew and pour?
Yes, I do.
Have you done that before?
Yes, I have. Back in high school.
But for your tertiary education, you don't do that?
No, I learned my lesson.
Okay, so let's talk about what you learned way back in the high school and how chew and pour has affected you. Let's talk about it.
Well, chew and pour, I would just say chew and pour is not a good thing for a student. I mean, when you are learning, you should concentrate on understanding what you are learning, not just acquiring that knowledge. Understanding is more important, and chew and pour doesn't do that trick.
But there are some students who say that, well, I have to chew and pour because that is what the lecturer wants. How about that one?
Well, it works for some people, but it's not the best way. It didn't work for me, and I mean, those people who say it's good, maybe it works for them. So if it works for them, fine, but it's just not advisable.
How about the lecturers who would want you to come back and just pour exactly what they gave you, especially for the reading subjects?
Well, I have never had a lecturer who wants me to give him exactly what he wrote in his handouts or something. But well, I don't know if there's a lecturer like that. But if there's a lecturer like that, I think if that's what he wants, you just have to give him.
Maybe said Nakujo.
All right. You've been a student before.
Of course.
You know what chew and pour is?
Yeah.
So tell me, what is chew and pour?
You chew, you pour, then you forget. Although you forget, but it's not everything that you forget.
What do you chew? What do you pour?
Like, let's say you have exams. You try to learn everything that your teacher, your lecturer has taught you. Then when it comes in the exams, you write. And sometimes it's not everything that you remember, and it's not everything that you forget. So at least you remember some and you forget some.
Right, but during the time you were in school,
Yeah.
you chewed and you poured. Did it really help you?
At some point, yes. At some point, no.
Right,
Because
so,
there are things that I can't remember anymore. Unless maybe I refer back to my notes and all that, but I can't tell you off head. Like
So
that.
tell me, why were you practicing the chew and pour system?
Well, I think because the subjects are a little bit plenty for us. You have to learn this, you have to learn that, and you can't keep all of them in your head. We are not machines. So let's say I have English. I only concentrate on English tonight. Then I'll choose everything that I know it will come. Then I'll come and pour. Tomorrow I have science. I'll choose science. So it's like that.
Did you get to a point where you chewed, but when it was time for you to pour, you couldn't pour?
Yeah.
So
The tension alone sometimes will make you forget what you've learned. So you really have to sit down for about 2 to 3 minutes. Then maybe the thing will start coming, then you write.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might not even remember. Yeah.
some students say that you would have to blame the lecturers for this particular syndrome, because there are some lecturers who would want you to pour out exactly what you have been given in class to them. If you change just one word, you would be marked wrong.
Yeah, it's true. Like, let's say English, for instance. Sometimes the writing of the essay, maybe they've given you the topic. It's not everything that what the teacher has taught you should. At least you should also use some of your own English to write. It's true, some lecturers don't like that you give dito, no.
But there are some lecturers who want you to give dito.
Yeah, so you know the kind of lecturer that you have. If he wants dito, you give it to him. If he
We've experienced it. I'm just thinking about entrepreneurship as a course, and my lecturer will bring fill in the blanks, true or false, and you have to chew that handout and pour it out. Can't remember any of those things right now, but let me just introduce to you Anis Hafa, an educationist who knows a lot about this particular subject. You see that my directors back there, my colleagues back there, my colleagues in here, everybody was sharing their stories with us relating to the things that we heard people say. What do you have to say?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, when I was in secondary school, that is how we're made to study. You memorize things, and you reproduce the stuff that you memorized. As soon as you walk out of the exam room, you've forgotten it. And, you know, it's, but then I've seen these things practiced at the university level. And that's what I think is heartbreaking. I was at one of our public schools 2 weeks ago, and I think that's what I was writing about in a graphic. I was going to give a presentation on how we can add value to our local resources. And then as I parked the car, I could hear a PA system, and there was a lecturer who was dictating information. And then I was wondering what it was. I thought, frankly, in the beginning, I thought it was a preacher. Then I peeked through the window, and you could, I mean, a whole bunch of young people, everybody's busy. The person dictates and they copy. But when there's a dictation and there's copying, then the next step suggests that you are supposed to reproduce exactly what you copied to get a point. And I found that very disappointing, because the idea of education, especially in the 21st century, is where you're able to think your own thoughts, where you're able to develop your own hypothesis. You can bring other people's thoughts and hypotheses to bear in your own estimation of things. But this business of reproducing other people's work verbatim is one of the worst things that you can do. In fact, there was a Brazilian educator called Paulo Freire who wrote about it, and the title was called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. This sort of thing mainly is in poor countries. And the reason why we continue staying poor is that by the time we chewed and poured and done all that, the native creative elements that we have dissipated out of our system. And many times when you ask people a particular question, instead of them telling you exactly what they think about it, it doesn't matter whether they are right or wrong. They try to go into a textbook to find information for you. And many times, some of the most important things are not in textbooks. They are things that we develop over a period of time. We bring our own reflections on it. So it's something that really need to stop, you know, because when we look at, many times we look at schools as buildings, but which is fine. That's the infrastructure. But then we also need what we call the cognitive infrastructure, the thinking processes that will make us different from other people, and also the kind of novelties that we bring to life. If you look at the people who are making waves in the world, they don't copy and reproduce things. They think things through, and they adapt things. They come out with novel ideas. They come out to novel products. They come out to new services. That is what is lacking in third world countries. And when I'm teaching teachers in this country, that's one of the first things that I try to get teachers to stay away from.
But do you think the teachers are getting it? Because it stops with them. Because if you're my lecturer and you want me to reproduce for you, and I know that that's the only way I can pass, I will do it. I won't even think twice about it.
That's the thing. But then, you know, frankly, many times, now that's an important point. People come out with loads and loads of degrees and titles and the rest of it. That is, let's say, knowledge of the subject. How we can pass that information on to somebody else so that they can make sense of it in their own way. Now, that is the difficulty for a lot of professors and lecturers, because they probably have not been processed through a system where you encourage and support people to be reflective on what it is that you pass on to them. I would hate people to reproduce the information that I've given them. I want to have a bearing on what I've said. And frankly, the most important thing is this. What do you think about what I've said? I mean, how would you adapt what I said to fit a particular situation? These are the critical thinking processes that are missing in the culture.
Are Ghanaian teachers and lecturers ready for a student to tell them that their theory perhaps is not the best?
You know, many of our instructors are very chauvinistic. Chauvinistic means that they don't want to see someone thinking better than they do. But that's the essence of teaching. When I'm teaching young people, I want them to think better than I'm thinking. Because we are preparing them for their world. We are not preparing them for my world. You know, I mean, how long am I going to stay on this planet? But a young kid who's about 20 is going to live another 30, 40, 50 years. So we want them to stay on our shoulders so they can glean a broader horizon. That is what the African mindset has to begin to accept. That it's not us infusing people with knowledge that are pertinent to us. We have to begin to look at how they can perform with or without us. And that takes a whole new crop of teaching methodologies, a whole new crop of mentality that we have to bring, use to bring young people up. And many times, to be honest with you, I feel very sorry for our young people in the sense that we don't seem to have a purpose. Education has to have a purpose. Why am I studying this? And young people have to be in a position where they can look at you in the eye and ask you, what am I studying this for? But in our time, if we were to ask a teacher, what am I studying this for? They would tell you, you're going to need it in the future. Things have changed so much that the future changes every day. So for me to be stuck thinking about something that I can apply in the future is wayward. What we need to do now is we are learning this today because you can apply it today. So what I keep saying is this, that even if the element of lecturing has to stop, especially these days of digital equipment. We're looking at internet, Wikipedia, we're looking at, let's say, posting information on YouTube and that sort of thing. All of that, the lecturing has to be done ahead of time. And what I keep saying is that every course that is being taught, especially at the universities, need to have a website. And the lectures have to be posted on the website so that you can listen to the lectures at any point you want. And even if you don't understand the first time, you can go ahead and listen to it over and over again. But when we come back to the classroom, we are not doing lecturing anymore. We are getting discussions. This is the view that I expressed on a particular topic. What is it that I'm going to get from you? How are we going to discuss it together so that when we leave, we make sense of it? Anytime you memorize something and you reproduce it, you have not made sense of it. You know, those are what we call the lower thinking skills.
You know, there are other people who also say that, listen, I chewed and poured sometimes, but look at me, I am not doing bad.
You know, there will always be exceptions, but we cannot make the rules because of the exceptions. If you look at, let me give an example. Anytime there's something important that has to be done, even on a contractual basis, we have to import people from outside because they are the thinkers. We hardly go back to some of our own people that we've educated in this country. And then the amount of money that we pay to expatriates, because they seem to be thinking a little differently. But are we capable of thinking the same thoughts? Of course. But it has to start in the elementary school, in the secondary schools, at the university levels, so that we are confident people. What is missing here is the confidence. We don't have it. And people don't think that they can match others because we think that they think better than us. Is the worst thing that we can do to this country, especially in terms of how we raise young people.
Mr. Hava, have you thought about if lecturers and teachers were to stop giving out handouts and forcing students to study strictly the pieces they've given them and reproduce for them? Have you stopped to think about what they will be losing, what the lecturers will be losing, because that is how some of them also make money?
Let me tell you this. The excitement of teaching at the tertiary level is where you begin to develop the course outline, and you begin to develop the activities where every person is involved in it. You can have, I mean, I have written books too, but I'm not going to get young people to reproduce my information because I can tell that that's a form of plagiarism. If all you're doing is reproducing my information, that is plagiarism. But the important thing is, and also to bring excitement into the lecture hall itself, is where you are listening to the point of view of young people. That is what makes teaching such a classic type activity, because you are watching young people develop their own ideas. That's so refreshing. You know, they start from, they start with a hypothesis. What if I were to do this? What if I adapted something? What if I changed something? What would be the outcome? So that in education, nothing is fixed. We live in a very dynamic world. Everything is in a state of flux. It moves, it changes. How do we as human beings begin to maneuver the contours of life itself, the meandering? Those are the things that bring the excitement out of teaching. But I'm not going to use my textbook for young people to memorize and produce it to me. If I do that, I'll be doing a disservice to them.
You know, you asked a certain question, and I want to try and answer, because I know that that's what a lot of young people would also say today if you were to ask them, why are you doing this? Why are you studying this? The first question, because I've asked that question a lot, will be to get the degree, because every profession would say the minimum qualification, if you want to be paid at least well, is a degree. So I'm not necessarily studying the course because I would use what I am learning, but it's because I want the degree. Is that a bad thing to say?
Let's put this in a good context. It's okay to get a degree. It's okay to get a certificate, but we have to begin to look at the curricular objectives. How do you get a degree? If you get a degree just by producing information, that degree is worthless. However, part of the requirement, and this is a program that is being done by International Baccalaureate, for example, is that there's a piece of it called the Creative Activity Service, CAS. In other words, for you to earn this degree, these are some of the other requirements too, where we are looking at how you can think, how we can add value to your own thinking, and how that thinking can be processed in a way where it can be developed into a product, it can be developed into a service, or where you can extend yourself where there's benefit to other people. That is one of the most sophisticated ways of looking at it. So your degree requirement will be based on that. No degree requirement today should be based on people memorizing stuff. Because at the end of the day, when you come, what are you going to use it for? You know, we have to put a premium on quality education in the sense that it has to make sense to us. It has to make sense to us as we are studying it. It has to make sense to us as we exit. You know, when we don't do that, then we begin to have a lot of people who can, all they do is reproduce information. But what can they do with it? And the person who comes to mind, you know, this has been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
The person who comes to mind is Kwejil Aggrey. He said in 1925, almost 90 years ago, that don't tell me what you know, show me what you can do. I think that should be the motto of every primary school in this country. That should be the motto of every secondary school in this country. And that should be the motto of every tertiary university in this country. The question is this: don't tell me what you know, because it's useless to me. Show me what you can do, so that together we can make sense of something that's meaningful. But the worst thing that's happened in this country now is that look at the number of districts that we have in this country. We have about 200 districts, and every district is different. What we have to do now, and I'm talking to lecturers and the professors now and the teachers, how can we develop young people who can use the local input and add value to it, so that we don't have the mass exodus of young people from the districts coming to Kumasi or Takoradi or Accra, for the menial jobs. There's so much wealth in this country. Education should focus on that. How do we raise our economic status? How do we have a sense of self-fulfillment? How do we live longer? How do we live healthy lifestyles? And all of that has to start in the district level. So part of education has to focus on how we develop the communities in which we live. If you're doing that, where's the Chupo and Pass business? It doesn't fit.
Ms. Harper, we are supposed to be learning, for instance, 10 subjects, and this is across the entire country and sometimes in West Africa. How do I learn something that is specific in my community? How do I learn something that's related specifically to my community?
That's a good question. What we do here is that we learn the theories first, and if you are lucky, we find an application for it. Many times we learn all the theories and there's no application. But now there's something called flipping. You're going to start with doing something. For example, when I was growing up, we were learning photosynthesis, the leaf structures and that sort of thing. You can turn it around where you start by growing a plant. And then you relate your scientific discoveries to something that you're doing. It makes more sense to you because you can see a seed. You can draw the seed as you plant it. You can, when you water it, you are describing the processes even in English. How do you go about doing something? As you watch the shoots come up, you can take pictures of it. As the leaves begin to show, you can change colors from yellow to green and that sort of
that
thing.
will make the learning of science really enjoyable.
See, what we're doing is that we are doing it backwards, but we have to go to the real thing and begin to see how, frankly, the best experiences of learning are the kinds of things that we do in our hands. But then this is not new now. If you look at the Montessori system with elementary school children, it's based on that, a sense of discovery, a sense of inquiry. What is it that we're doing, and what have we learned as a result of what we're doing? The theories come later. But here, we bombard the human being with theories, exactly what you're talking about. In 23 subjects, you are learning 23 separate theories. There's never an application element to it. How on earth can a human being understand it? Because there's no emotional involvement. When there's an emotional involvement, that means you got up in the morning, you put the seed in the ground, you put water on it. You are part of the learning structure itself. So as the leaves come up, you have great expectations in terms of what to expect. This is how we should be doing it. But then Ghana is such a rich country. I'm telling you, if we start education that way, in no time we can be like Singapore.
Is the GES thinking like the way you're thinking, for instance?
People are so, I don't like to personalize this.
Yeah, but because we have an institution that is responsible, for regularizing, or if you like, putting strategies in place and implementing things in the education sector. I mean, you are one brilliant person. You say realistic things. We're lucky that we have you to share the things that you share with us. You write in the graphic as well. But is the institution paying attention to the things that you say so that we will see it happening on the ground?
I get asked that question all the time, and then I see my role. I'm glad that I've been exposed quite a bit. I've taught outside the country. I was educated in Ghana. I got some more education outside the country. I've taught outside. I've taught in this country. And what I continue looking for is the best practices, And what I can do is continue teaching teachers in terms of the new ways to do things. My column comes out every week. And there's a book that I'm writing now in terms of how we can even use education to elevate the system.
You should set up a model school.
Now, that's a good point. But, I'm a writer, number one. I'm not an administrator. I'm a writer in the sense that I'm a person who processes ideas and who shares ideas. I'm a person who hands-on with teachers at the school sites, you know, where they're the bulk of it. But I'm looking at the Ghana education, the public school system, where we have, the university alone, we have 240,000 students in the tertiary systems alone. How do we reach all of them? You see, that is the thing. So we have to reach the people who are teaching them. So these are the things that we want to begin to look at. And what I keep saying is this, part of the curriculum, especially in the elementary school, is that, and this is something I practice in the US, every child in this country that's in the school going age should be working on a project, because you learn more from the project than reading and answering questions, the true and false things. This has to be a national policy, you know, where everybody benefits. It's not a matter of setting up an institution of about 200 people or 1,000 people. It has to cut across the country, because we cannot wait and be in lockstep with decadence. We have to move on a bigger scale.
All right. So finally, a student is watching and listening to the things you're saying, and he's saying, yeah, this will help me. But the lecturer is forcing me to reproduce. What do I do? Do I make my own decision based on some of the things that the person has heard this morning?
You know, I'll tell you, one of the difficult things that I do now, and you ask a very valid question, is where young people invite me to the universities all the time to talk to them in terms of how they can equip themselves with 21st century skills. Invariably, what I ask is opposed to how they've been taught. So what I tell young people is that have your education in your own hands. When you have a course outline, begin to develop an affinity for aspects of it that you like and develop an expertise in it. You know, that's one. The other thing too is that the young people themselves have to begin to form civic unions. Civic unions, hopefully, with the faculty that are amenable to change, so that we begin to change the old processes. But it has to be done civilly. We cannot be destructive in making changes come about. We have to begin to be assertive enough and have meetings with the professors themselves, you know, and especially school leadership, that we cannot continue being taught that way. Because at the end of the day, it's destructive not only to the young people, but destructive to universities too. I'll give you another example. Out of the 100 best universities in the world, not one of them is African. Now, what does that tell you? It's how we are taught, how young people think, and even the physical infrastructure. Can you go to the toilet and flush after you've used it? All these things are the elements that we need, and it's not necessarily research. We can see these things that work. Why do our universities sit in dust, for example? So what I keep telling young people when I speak with them is that look at your own environment and begin to make a difference there. But the most important thing is that you want to put your minds together in a civil way so that you make the drastic changes.
All right, Ms. Annie Haffar, always a big pleasure hosting you. I thank you very much, and I thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. All of us have learned something. Really, really grateful for your time this morning.
You're most welcome.
Ms. Annie Haffar is an educationist, one who knows a lot, and from time to time, you know, we get him here so that we can also, you know, receive a little of the blessing. So, chew, pass, forgets. It's off the table right now. We're using what the lecturer says. That is just a guideline. We're thinking outside the box now, even as students. We're coming up with Showbiz right now. Is it true that Hip Life came out of High Life? But when the two are served on the same platform, the experience is something else. Later on, after AM Talk, Gladys Oseo Radio will tell us more about what happened when High Life met Hip Life at the Best of Life concert that will be in Showbiz. But up next is AM Talk. Stay with me.